My name is Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. I love this. I look so forward to Steve's introductions. I specifically, I always ask for him to introduce me. I don't want anybody else. I get pumped on the way up here, just thinking about the introduction that I'm going to get by Steve. And let me tell you something. Tonight, my last night here, he put as much power as I've ever seen him put. He is literally my Freddie Mercury. You know what I mean? We are the champions. You know, it's very exciting. It's good to be here. I love this group. I'm doing these things for like 20, 30 years or something. These step series, and it's good to be here. By the way, if there happens to be anybody in the audience who belongs to the West Dixie Club, please see me after the meeting. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody who belongs to that place. But anyway, so it's good to be here, and I do like you guys. I love you guys. I really do. And it got back to me. I don't know who said this, that I always get the feeling that you like me too. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna fix that tonight. I'm thinking that I've been entirely too kind to y'all. You know what I mean? So don't take this personally, okay? And I'm just going to tell you the truth and let the chips fall with it. I'm going to most of you guys, if you weren't here, well, it's too bad. I think it was recorded. Most of you guys have heard the talk on the Crazy Priest. I heard, nobody's heard the talk on the Crazy Priest? Didn't I just do it you told me I did it last week.
You did?
This is how much that's how much
they were paying attention.
This is how much it sticks with these guys. You know what I mean? There was a powerful talk. You know, you don't remember the guy who said, "I'm not the guy." The priest I went to, and I poured out my deepest, darkest secrets, and he said, "What did he say to me?" Remember what he said to me? "You're full of shit." What's the point? What's the point in doing this thing? You know,
Louise is hysterical.
So I got well, I'm glad I like it. Yeah, good. So I got a story that I've never told. Never. I call it the Alky Professor story. Because it sort of fits in. This is going from like the Crazy Priest to the Alky Professor into 11 and 12, and I think it has something to do with something, but I'm just going to throw it out there and you'll see how you feel about it. Has to do a lot with my life now, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it does. You know, I get a lot of calls during the day. Calls and texts and everything. From all over. You can't even imagine. And you know about this.
I do.
I mean, so people who, you know, blah, 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 blah. I've been sober 5 years, and it's not, you know, what should I do? I'm depressed, you know, so what should I do? What book should I read? What should I do? You know, everybody wants to know, you know, I'm on a lunch break. I got 5 minutes. What do you think I ought to do? You know what I mean? I get all these calls.
Saved my life in 5
God bless
minutes.
him. I want to help him, you know, and I figured out the only way I can help him is I got to kill him. I got to kill him. I got to do what the Crazy Priest did to me. Remember, the moral of the story of the Crazy Priest is sometimes you learn as you go through life and you look back on your life, the people that helped you the most are the people that hurt you. That hurt you. You know, didn't pat you on the back, didn't tell you how much they just, you know, I was told once that, you know, A is like you'll be walking, if you keep on walking in the same direction, you're going to wind up where you're headed. Does that make any sense to you?
Totally.
But every once in a while, you're walking in a particular direction. And because the road gets narrow, and you're walking like away from where you should be going, and you bump into somebody. Bob Azance used to call them Eskimos. You bump into some Eskimo that you've never seen before, and something happens with this person, or you hear some person, and the way he talks or whatever happens, it's sort of like fires. I mean, maybe he says something mean, maybe he says something horrible, and it's sort of like, and you change directions. you go from like here to change directions 2 degrees, and then all of a sudden you find you're going in a different direction because you heard this guy. There was a guy when I had 10 years, I was going down the tubes, I went up to a guy for help. Well, I told you the last week, even though you don't remember it, I told you about the crazy priest where I was dying because of something, you know, a case I had or something like that. And I went to him for help, and he said, I think you're full of shit. That's what he said to me. And then he just beat the shit out of me. A priest, you know? And I walked away, and I told everybody at the retreat that he was crazy, don't go see him, and everything like that. And I was battling him in my mind. How could you say that to me? You're not supposed to say that. You're a priest. And I went there for help, and you told me I was full of shit. And then I sat in my bed in the retreat house, and I started thinking about what he said and who the hell he thinks he is. And then all of a sudden this thought crossed my mind, and the thought was, maybe he's right. And the next thought was, he is right. And I went over what he says, he's right. And my whole life changed. My whole life changed on how I approach life because this guy told me I was full of shit. I was looking for somebody to tell me I'm okay and everything's going to be okay. And I was right and they were wrong, and and here's the answer. I was looking for the answer, and the answer was, you're full of shit and you don't know full of shit, and this is what your problem is. And after I got past the anger and I sat down on a little bed in the monastery underneath the cross, all of a sudden, out of the blue, says, maybe he's right. Sometimes some people take 20 years to say, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm full of shit. So you're going to find often that the real lessons come with a little pain first. Pain is the touchstone. That repeated, how do we use it? Change it. Repeated humiliations, final crushing of our self-sufficiency. So this is sort of like a little takeoff on that, which has something to do with the 12th step. It has something to do with I'm going to fix you up tonight. But I don't think you're going to like it. But I'm going to try it anyway. I mean, you might walk out here hating me. You can do that. That's okay. I'll be okay with that. I'll be okay with that. I actually will be okay with that. The whole group hates you. Never wants to see you again, because at least that means they're thinking about me, right? I won't be thinking about them.
Not to know.
They'll be thinking about me. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story, a couple things. I'm going to read a couple things in the book, and we'll see whether you get it. So I'm going to read 3 things out of the big book about. There's a part in the big book that says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Have you guys ever heard that before? Yeah. What do you think they mean by that? We went through this like last time. I'm going to ask you. It's not whether you read the big book. It's not whether you read the big book. I mean, I've read the big book backwards and forwards. I remember, it's whether you understand. You can read the whole thing all over and not understand what you're reading. There's this great line in the Bible where the apostle Philip was walking along this road after a big thing in Jerusalem, and there was this eunuch that was a high officer in another country who had also been there, and he was reading the book of Isaiah, and what's his name? Philip, the way it says it in the Bible, hears this silent voice, this thing in his mind comes to his mind and says, go up and talk to that guy. It's sort of like if you were on a plane, and this has happened to you, or anywhere, and you're in an airport. Imagine you're in an airport, and you're sitting there, you're all alone in the airport, you're waiting for the plane, you wish you had a meeting or with another outlook, and all of a sudden, like right next to you, 2 rows down or whatever it is, you see a guy reading the big book. And there's something inside of you, you say, you want to try to link up with that guy. You want to somehow finagle where you say, I see you reading the big book or something like that, because you want to talk to him. So he somehow, Philip says, the voice says, go talk to that guy. He's reading scripture, So Philip goes up and he says to the guy, this guy's reading the big book, reading the good book. Dr. Bob said He said, if you want to know what A is about, read the good book. That's what he said. He said the books that we find absolutely essential are 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, the book of James. As a matter of fact, their path was to read the Bible and study the Bible. That was the path. So rarely have I seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path.
Early.
You see, in my mind, I'm a logical guy. I figure if you're not studying the Bible, you're not following their path. I just say shit like that to piss you off. Problem is, you won't be able to forget that. One day, remember that. When you're fixing to call somebody up and say, "What's the problem?" I'm doing everything. So what's the problem? I'm doing everything. I'm doing the 12th. I'm doing everything, and you won't figure out what the problem is, and then one day you'll remember. Oh, what am I not doing? But in any event, so the bottom line is and he also said, first things first means seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. So there's a lot. So it's not so much reading the book, but understanding what the hell you're reading. Instead of, you see, the God as you understand Him is not necessarily God. It's the God you feel comfortable with. You know, it's the God you feel comfortable with. You don't want to feel comfortable with a God that upsets you, but alcohol or confronts you. But, well, sometimes alcoholics need to be confronted. That's what good sponsors are for. You know, that's what good sponsors confront you. Other people basically enable you. They co-sign your bullshit. So he goes up to Philip goes up to the eunuch, yeah, and he says, "Do you know what you're reading?" It's like me walking up to a guy in the airport who's reading a big book. He says, "Do you understand what you're reading? What are you reading?" He says, "You understand?" He said, and this is what the eunuch says. He says, "How can I unless somebody shows me? How can I unless somebody explains it to me?" And what we don't understand is we want to read all the books, all the help stuff, but we want to do everything that we're supposed to do without having to ask anybody for help. We just don't want to ask people. We don't want to ask sponsors. We don't want to say, "Will you be my sponsor?" Just tell me what book to read. Because it's an intellectual disease. If I read enough books, then I'll be able to handle this thing. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You know, you got to know what you're reading. So on this whole thing, rarely have I seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. So we're going to talk about it. And the path they did was they didn't read the big book because it hadn't been written yet. And so let me read you some stuff out of the big book. This is on page 15. On page 15 it says, this is Bill Wilson, "My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems." So this is the solution. This is try to figure out the solution to your problem. "It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work." Maybe there's some people here who are worried about money and they can't find work. I mean, things aren't. It's like my sponsor said to me, "How do you doing?" I said, "I'm doing great." He says, "You must be getting your own way." Sometimes in life, you can be 20 years sober, you ain't getting your own way. Life is all about not getting your own way. Sure, I know you're happy when you get your own way, but most of the time you don't get your own way. "It was fortunate for my old business associates to remain skeptical for a year and a half, during which time I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment." This is when he was 18 months sober. This is Bill Wilson at 18 months sober. By the way, he got the same way when he was 20 years sober. It can happen when you're 20 years sober. It can happen when you're 5 years sober. It can happen to you tomorrow. Plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But soon I found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. A design for living that works. You know, what is the design for living? The design for living is go up to that guy and talk to him. You know, travel an hour and a half for like 10, 11 weeks and go up to talk to those people over at the, and drive back in at the 12-step house. You know, spend 8 years on relay between the hours of 9 at night and 9 the next morning talking to alcoholics. Make coffee with the group for 18 months. You know, sponsor everything that moves. You know, give you up. You know, I mean, just maybe, you know, so that's listen, really haven't seen her herself who has thoroughly followed our path. This was the path. Okay, wait, gets better. Page 42. 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I had thought myself alcoholic and if I was ready, really licked this time. And I had to concede both propositions. Then, you ready for this? They outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. This is not when there were 10,000, where it was all over the place. You took a vote of meetings whether you're going to believe this or not. This is like 100 of them. This is when you couldn't go to a meeting unless you got down on your knees and gave your life to God. That was their path. That's not our path. That was their path. That was their path. You couldn't go to a meeting unless you got down on your knees and gave your life to God. So you didn't have too many guys at the meeting saying, I'm an atheist. I'm just saying. It's not like today. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, why would I tell you? Because they were talking about church and God. And as a matter of fact, the portrait of the man on the bed shows Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob with the Bible open. Because that's how they did it. That was their path. Though I had not been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow, but the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. Let me tell you what's not necessarily drastic. Getting a sponsor. Going to meetings. You know what I mean? It's not like drastic. There's some drastic shit that they were doing. There's some drastic stuff they were doing. But it may not be the stuff that you're doing. It may not be the stuff I was doing. So let me now here's the next thing. Here's something. This is page 97. Never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. Which I think means a kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day. But of course, in order to understand what the Good Samaritan is, you'd have to read the Good Samaritan. It's capitalized. Good Samaritan. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day. So if you haven't read Luke 15, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Because the Good Samaritan is in Luke 15. And the reason they said you got to act the Good Samaritan is because they were reading the story of the Good Samaritan, which is a story by Jesus. That's what they were doing. Many of you don't know what that story is about. They don't even understand that story, so they don't really know what the... So you're like that eunuch. You're the eunuch. You're reading this book, but you don't know what you're reading. You only think you know, or you gloss over that, because you're the guy who says to Philip, when he says, you understand what you're reading, you're the guy who says, how can I unless somebody tells me? You're that guy. Kindly act once in a while. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money and your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable, which means more than once, trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Your wife may sometimes say she is neglected. Well, shit, my wife always says that crap. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have a fight with him if he is violent. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you will have to meet such conditions. Drastic, you know. Rarely have I seen a person who has thoroughly followed our path. If you're really in the program of recovery, that's what you're involved in. That's what I was involved in. That's how I was raised. I asked a guy named Bob Sullivan to be my sponsor, and we would go out looking for drunks. We would go on 12-step calls while the guys were still drinking. You know, we would take people to meetings. We went to a meeting once or twice a day. You know, not Zoom meetings, but once or twice a day. Sometimes I went 3 times a day. I had waves of self-pity. My sponsor said I can fix that. I think it's about time we started making coffee for the group. You've heard that story. I said, obviously I haven't explained myself so well, and he said we made coffee for 18 flipping months for the group. At the same time, going out on 12-step calls, setting up chairs, making coffee, and going to 1 or 2 meetings a day. There was no 90 and 90. They used to say 90 and 90. I don't even know whether they still say that. It was like 250 and 90 or something like that. Because those were the guys. I still, to this day, I don't know why I got those guys. I guess I was just blessed. I wanted what they had, and I hung out with them, and I did what. It's like the guy says in the book. He says that I did what I was ordered to do. There were no suggestions. I don't know why I fell in with that crowd, where they said, do this, greet the person. Why don't you shut up and start working with a guy who has a real problem? Talk to that guy there. I mean, you need to do the integral banquet chairman twice, you know. You need to be the secretary of the group. You need to go to the hospital. I want you to go to the hospital, you know, for the next 6 months and go through the floors and look at people. I'd go down to the hospitals, you know, from 8 till 12 o'clock at night. I'd walk the corridors, look into a room. It was all dark, and I'd see the silhouette of a guy, and I'd walk in there, and I'd say, hey, how you doing? And he'd sort of look down, and he'd be a guy my age. He was kicked out of his house. He was in the hospital for the first time. Told me how his life was over and everything like that, and I talked about what was going on with me. I did that almost every day for months, you know, along with the other stuff. Never stopped. Not because I'm a good guy or I wanted to, because of my sponsors, because whether it was Bob Sullivan or whether it was Joe Snyder or whether it was John Glenn or Dion, whoever it was, and all their friends who had 20, 30, 40 years, that was how you did AA. That's how you did AA. That was AA. And you hung out with people that did it that way. You didn't hang out with people that were smoking in the parking lot or trying to hook up or something. That was AA all about. And reading material and doing all that stuff. That was AA. That's my AA. And I never stopped. It got worse. It got crazier. My wife would yell at me. Why you going to? You went to a meeting last night. Went to a meeting last night. I never see you. You know what I mean? I said, well, this is what I do. Somehow, for some reason, when my wife said, what if I told you I'm not going to be here? I'll be gone. You know, I can't take this anymore. You're like, you know, A's like your wife and your husband and everything like that. I say, look, I love you and I hope you're here, but I'm going to the meetings. I don't know what gave me I've sponsored so many guys that I called up and I said, well, let's go to the meeting. He says, I can't. Susie wants me to go to the movies tonight. I sponsored so many guys that would answer the phone and say, I can't go tonight. Susie wants to go to the movies. Well, good. The next time you're going to drink, why don't you call up Susie? You know what I mean? I was brainwashed. My sponsor said, maybe your brain needed washed. That's AA to me. I'll tell you what AA is to me. I go to a meeting at 8:30 at night, and I get home at 1 o'clock in the morning. And my wife says, what are you doing? He says, well, I thought it was an 8:30 meeting tonight. And I says, yeah. Then we went to Puffernick's, and we sat around drinking coffee for 3-4 hours. That's what AA, let me tell you, I want to try to explain this to you. That is my AA. That's why I go to 3 Zoom meetings a day, 7 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 4 o'clock, and sometimes at night. That's why I drive up here for an hour and a half and then drive back again for 12 weeks. That's why I fly to other parts of the country and I do this stuff. That's why after this, I'm supposed to do some with the West Dixie Club, but there's something came up with a health thing. I can't do it, but I'm trying to find somebody there. That's why I do this all the time. This is my life. I had one guy say to me, he says, you don't have a life. I said, you're right. Why would I have a life? I don't have a life. This is my life. I don't have a, don't you understand? I gave up my life. I gave up my life. He says, your job is to be a maximum purpose. I gave my life up. My life used to be cars and broads and getting laid and running around and going to baseball games. I have no life. I have no life.
I share it with you.
You share it with me. I have no life. The good part, I really don't have any life. This is my life. Now I got to tell you something. Here's the good thing. I should get no credit for it because I'm having a blast. Mm-hmm. And as a result of having a life where I have no life, where I'm just trying to do God's will in my life. My sponsor once said, when I kept on saying, well, what do I do? What's the problem? Blah, blah, blah. And he'd say, well, when was the last meeting you went to? I said, well, what does that have to do with it? He says, everything. They asked Dr. Bob, what does God have to do with it? He says, everything. And he said, this is what he'd say to me. He'd say, he was a used car salesman. He made things simple. He says, Russell, when you go to meetings, you feel good. When you don't go to meetings, you don't feel so good. That took like 5 years to figure out. You know what I mean? And I was going to a lot of meetings. So I get these guys, and they call me up, and they say sometimes I sponsor them, sometimes they just call me up for meetings. And they say, I'm not feeling good, things aren't going right, they ain't going the way I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the heck they say, there's some sort of problem. They have 5 years, they got 10 years, or whatever it is. So I say, and look what I got. I'm in my 45th year, still going to 3-4 meetings a day, you know what I mean? Doing a workshop, 3 hours. I don't know what your meetings are like. My workshop's 3 hours, 3.5 hours. We get 90 people. Live, we got a meeting that gets, it's 2 hours. We got 2 hours, 3-hour meetings.
Yep.
People all over the world. So here's this, that's what I do. That's my life. I give my will and my life up to the care of God. I can't even think. Upon awakening, I ask God to direct my thinking. I can't even think. I start thinking, you don't have any fun. I said, why would I want to have fun? What does fun have to do with it? I lived 31 years having fun, and I almost killed myself and hurt other people. I was chasing fun all over the world. So what does that have to do with anything? So a guy calls me up and he's got a problem. He says, I'm 8 years sober and I'm not feeling well, whatever the hell it is that's going on. And I say to him something like, well, how many meetings you going to? He says, I go to 3 meetings a week. And here's what he's thinking. I go to 3 meetings a week. I'm doing a lot. I said, how many people do you sponsor? He says, well, I don't really sponsor anybody or something like this. I don't really sponsor people like this. I don't really. Well, I go to, and I tell him I go to 3 meetings. I'll give you my email address. I'll give you all the meetings. You can log on to them. You don't even have to leave your house. You go to 3 Zoom meetings a week, and he says, I don't like Zoom. I don't like driving an hour and a half. Actually, I do like it. I listen to hymns and stuff, but I said, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, and then I start thinking about what they said in the book. When they say innumerable visits to treatment centers, your life may be interrupted and all that sort of stuff. And so these people, they want to know what book I should read to find out how to get what you have. You know? What step should I be on? You know what I mean? So when I was going to law school, and I went to law school to get in that gal's pants, although I didn't think that at the time, but I went to law school. And I was always a good student, A's and B's and everything like that. I went to law school, and the only thing worse on the planet than lawyers are law students. They ought to kill them all while they're there. I was a law professor at St. Thomas University. They're monsters, terrible people. You know, they're usually the best and the brightest. They think they're the best and the brightest, and they're like in their incubus state, ready to get out there and kill people and mess people up and stuff. There's probably a couple of nice ones. I've never met them, but anyway. So I went to law school, and I had this professor. I'm not going to give him his full name. He's dead now, but I mean, he was a professor, and he was my contracts professor, and he'd show up drunk to class all the time. He'd be drunk. And I went through my first year of contracts, and you get one test a year. And whatever you get on that test, that's it. And he gave me a D or D minus or a D plus or something. I never got a D in my life. You get A's and B's, I got even a D, you know? And it dragged down my average and did everything. I said, I know, and I so know that it was 11 o'clock at night and he was on his 5th glass of scotch, that fucking son of a bitch. And he turned over my thing and he said, D, and that's it. He didn't even read it or understand it. I know that's what happened. So I went to see him to sort of like, I don't know what I thought I was going to do, like convince him to give me an A or bring it up to a C plus or something like that. And I went to see him, and I'll never forget it. And I don't know what he even said to him. I couldn't have got a D. I get B's and A's on everything like that. I wrote the whole thing in blah, blah, blah. I'd studied a lot. And he looked at me, and he wasn't a crazy priest. He was just an alky, you know, and he looked at me, and I was like 21 years old. This is long before I came to day, and this is what he said to me. I said, I can't believe you gave me a D, and it's going to ruin my career or something like this, or whatever I said to him. He says, well, you know, Mr. Spatz, not everybody has what it takes to be a lawyer. I say, fuck it, you know, not everybody. You're not good enough. And so I took his class. I could have taken somebody else's class, but I took it over. Because I'm an alcoholic and I'm stupid. I figured maybe I'd catch him on a day where he'd grade the papers and he wouldn't be drunk. You know what I mean? And I took the class and I got like, I don't know what I got, like a B minus or something like that. Got a better grade, but I got past that thing. You know what I mean? And I don't know whether I've ever been, well, I have been mean enough to do this. Every time I feel like when I get, I don't do this every time, but I'm capable of doing it. When I get one of these guys that's got 8 years, or 9 years, or 12 years, or 20 years, and he starts telling me how he's not feeling good, and he's a thumb-sucking crybaby, and things aren't working out, and he's going to meetings, you know, and he's sober 18 years or something like that. And I ask him, well, how many meetings you going to? And he says, well, I go to 3 a week. How many people are you sponsoring? Well, I'm not sponsoring any right now. You know what I mean? You go, and I start asking him, like, what's he doing? Every once in a while, I feel like what I should say is, well, you know, Fred, not everybody is going to have 40 years. Not everybody's going to have 20 years. You know? You're just not one of those guys that are going to have 40 years. Because you ain't doing shit. You ain't working no program. You don't have a program in you. You are just coasting and doing whatever the hell you want to do. You're not even in AA. You're in the outskirts of AA. You go to meetings where nobody talks like I talk. You never get confronted. You probably don't have a sponsor and talk to your sponsor. You don't do shit. But that's okay. Not everybody is supposed to have 20, 30, 40 years. As a matter of fact, most people don't. So I don't have any books to give you or anything to give you, because you know something? You wouldn't fucking read them anyway. Just like the guys who say, give me your email so I can go to those Zoom meetings you do, and then a year later they call up and they're still in the trouble. I said, well, it's funny, I gave you that. I don't see you at Zoom. I don't see you at any of those meetings. He says, yeah, I don't like Zoom. So, but a few people, I'm not the only one who does this shit. I'm not the only one who does this shit. I just had tough sponsors. I don't know what it was. They told me to do stuff. I did it until I enjoyed it. Until my life became a life of sacrificing and just wanting to do what the Lord, I thought the Lord wanted me to do, is to help other people. Go up to that guy, ask him if he knows what he's reading. Sponsor that guy. Say yes to that guy. Go to that group. Go to this group. Fly here, fly there. Where my whole life, the whole thing became stupid drastic. Where the whole thing became drastic. I don't know, you have drastic sobriety? You one of these guys start laying back and you go to 2 or 3 or 4 meetings a week and, is that your deal? You don't sponsor anybody. You sponsor 2 people, you haven't spoken to them in a week and they're not calling you. You know what I mean? You don't go on 12-step calls. You don't make the coffee. You don't do shit. You settled into sort of like a sort of, relaxing sort of AA thing. You go to meetings and you're just like hanging around alcoholics. You're basically in some sort of fellowship. People talk about God, it makes you uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You're sure as hell not going to talk about God. You know what I mean? And you're just sort of hanging out, sucking your thumb, and every once in a while you go through a bad time, and maybe you talk to somebody, maybe you don't, and you say, what book should I read in order to be okay? I'm doing the 4-step, I'm doing all the steps, and I'm doing all this stuff. Is that your deal? See, I'm just telling you, I was thinking, well, what should I tell them? I said, why don't you just tell them the fucking truth? What are you treating them like babies for? Why don't you just tell them the truth? You want what I have, you better be able to do what I'm doing.
Amen.
Yeah.
I
mean, this is a serious disease. It's just looking for you to coast and rest on your laurels. You're headed for trouble if you do. Hey, let me tell you something. Let me tell you how this works. You got double-digit sobriety? You happy about that? It's shit. You know what double-digit sobriety is? It's the pathway to take the pedal off the metal and think that you've got it made. Because I'll tell you, when you start drinking with double-digit sobriety, after 22 years, you think like the disease has forgotten about you. Oh, thank God I made it to 10 years. Thank God I made it to 15 years. I'm okay now. Yeah, you ought to check out some of the guys I talk to who drink after 20 years, drink after 22 years. You know what I mean? Because they're not doing crap. You know what they're doing? They're not drinking and going to meetings. That's not even the program. That's not even an AA life. That's not the AA life. I read you, this is the big book, this is our basic text. This is what they thoroughly did. I just read you what they did. I just read you about how they help people. I just read you about going down to sanitariums, going down to people, amazing lift, a design for living. I just read you what the AA life is all about. So a guy comes up to me. This happens a lot. A guy comes up to me and says, you sponsor me. I said, sure. But I'll tell you what my deal is. I'm about an hour and a half south of here. And every Saturday I have a workshop. Why don't we do it this way? It's the only thing about me sponsoring. I'm happy to do it. But I said, but what I need you to do is be able to, you have cars? He says, yeah, just drive down to my house. And I'll give you every Saturday and we'll just, help me out with the workshop and stuff like that. And they say, well, that's pretty far. And I say, I know, I just drove it. I just drove it. I'm driving back tonight to see my wife. Well, that's pretty far. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Just because you sit in the garage doesn't make you a Buick. Don't think for 1 second that just because you're sitting in the 12-step house, the oldest step series in the 12-step house, that you have anything to do with being sober or being an Alcoholics Anonymous. You know? You want to compare, you want to see what AA life is all about and people in AA? Why don't you read this book? But read it, try to understand what they're saying. Because it's not written in Hindu. You know, they specifically talk about what they did. They went to hospitals. You know what I mean? They talked about God. They worshiped God. They gave their lives to that deal. You know, utterly abandoned themselves to God. Burned the idea into every alcohol. This is what they did. They're telling you what they did. And 90% of people in AA ain't doing 1/3 of what they're saying they did. While thinking they're doing it because they're picking up plastic medallions. Let's go. So I figured I'd end this up by quelching that rumor that I'm a nice guy. I wouldn't want you walking out in here liking me. I'd rather you just talk badly about me and say, who invited that son of a bitch up here? You know what I mean? Thank you very much.